In a moment, we'll be discussing whether those most recent events mark what many analysts are describing as a new world order. First, though, a reminder of what's happened in the past couple of weeks. And I'm joined now in the studio by Jamie Smith-Maillet, who's been following things from a European perspective, but is here with us in the Glasgow studio. Jamie, what do the last 2 weeks say about Trump's relationship with Europe?
Yeah, well, Lucy, we can say in some ways that relations have certainly soured somewhat. And this comes after the latest fallout that we've been hearing about here with the situation in Ukraine. But let's look at the background slightly. President Trump's calls on trade tariffs initially, and then obviously continued interest in the question around Greenland that I've reported on previously. But this new topic, new attack, a further shifting in tone felt in Munich last week with much criticism across the board. And before the diplomatic fallout this week, the American Vice President, J.D. Vance, in a speech at the Munich Security Conference last Friday, attacked European countries on free speech, saying the threat to security was much closer to home.
We gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security. And normally, we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within.
And then this week, talks in Riyadh hosted by the Saudis directly between Russia and American negotiation teams. And obviously European leaders not being present, marking another shift in tact, alarming European leaders who scrambled together this week in a meeting in Paris on Monday and on Wednesday.
And Jamie, do you think this shows that Trump has favoured relations with Putin over Zelensky?
Yeah, well, I'd say that's a sentiment overall, outwardly in any case. And Zelensky and Ukrainian counterparts were not openly invited to discussions. But President Trump later claimed that they were, welcome to attend if they wanted to do so. Zelensky has reacted to the talks and President Trump and calling him, President Trump, being manipulated by a bubble of disinformation from President Putin. And this is where we saw a further escalation in tone. President Trump calling Zelensky a dictator. And these are the remarks that we first saw on that social media platform, Truth Social. And then President Trump vocalized them at a press conference on Wednesday.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia. Something I'll admit that only Trump is going to be able to do in the Trump administration. We're going to be able to do it. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions of people have unnecessarily died. As I've said before, it's my hope that my greatest legacy will be as a peacemaker and a unifier. That would be a great legacy.
And Jamie, EU leaders, for the most part, they still support Zelensky.
Yeah, well, they did come together, as I said, in these emergency talks this week, and ultimately there is a high level of concern and panic about being snubbed in the Russian and US negotiations. So, first of all, the talks in Europe, there's been no clear outcome, but what we can see is there's continued discussion from Keir Starmer, France's Emmanuel Macron, to bolster a sort of peacekeeping force on the ground. But division, Germany, Poland, Spain, they've generally also shown reticence in this approach. We also know that Giorgia Meloni of Italy is an open supporter of the Trump administration, and she in some ways echoed what J.D. Vance was saying at the Munich speech at the conference, suggesting Europe had to fend for itself without the US.
And do you think then that Europe and the US are heading towards a chillier relationship, and will EU leaders have to take more responsibility?
Yeah, well, the hastily called talks would suggest that there is that need and that frustration being felt across the board. It has been reported that Poland's Andrzej Duda is heading to the US along with France's Macron and Keir Starmer next week to speak with Trump. And all of this showing, however, slightly different approaches. It would seem that there's a bit of a charm offensive being called for. But in Europe, as I said, there is a sense of division on the immediate approach, and obviously to come to a rapid consensus is the challenge, with the German elections obviously tomorrow, which could yet again change the output, the overall outcome when haste is needed.
Jamie, thank you so much. Jamie Smith-Maillet there, our correspondent who's been following things from a European perspective. He mentioned the German elections just after 9:30. We're going to talk more about them.
So